Very good. Hey, good afternoon. Sorry we're running a few minutes late. I'm Jeff Joseph. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications and Strategic Relationships with the Consumer Electronics Association. For those of you who may not know CEA, welcome. We are a trade organization representing more than 2,000 companies across the full ecosystem of consumer electronics, from large manufacturers to startups to retailers to content distributors. We touch almost everyone and anything that has to do with consumer technology. We lobby on behalf of policy positions. We have events like we're going to talk about today to help encourage and innovation in our industry and help educate our members and bring them together. And of course, we're best known for producing the International CES, the world's largest and greatest gathering of the consumer technology industry. But we're here today to talk about Innovate, which is our relatively new member conference. It's sort of a rebirth of an event we've held for several years. It's running next week, Tuesday, September 30th through Thursday, October the 2nd, at the Wigwam Resort in Phoenix, Arizona. And this event is really focused on innovation for both big companies and small technology companies. It's designed to help fuel investment, to help companies network and learn. We'll have some great panels to help educate, ask questions, get engaged, and it's specifically tailored towards entrepreneurs. We're trying to bring that startup spirit and energy as well as the design of the sessions to this conference. It also includes our annual membership meeting, so it's where you can learn about what we do throughout the year beyond producing events like Innovate and CS, and you can learn about our policy positions and our promotional campaigns, our market research, all the great things we do here. A lot of highlights. We're going to have a great keynote from Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. We're going to release some of our hottest and most popular research projects, our 5 disruptive technologies to watch report, and our holiday sales and forecasts for the year. There's a great workshop on crowdfunding. We're going to explore opportunities in 3D printing and wearables, some of the hottest markets and technologies in the industry today. We're going to have mentoring sessions. We're going to have an awesome food truck festival that I'm very excited about. We have a great panel on startup success stories, and we're also going to have some PR media training to help those of you who may have a shoestring budget and don't necessarily have the external or internal resources to really leverage your media relations. You can find a full schedule at www.ce.org/innovate, www.ce.org/innovate. I'm joined here this morning with Jake Sigal, who's a panelist on that Startup Success Stories panel I mentioned, which runs 10:45 to 11:45 next Wednesday. Jake is the CEO and co-founder of Tome. They haven't fully announced what they're doing yet, but Jake tells me it has to do with the Internet of Things, and maybe he'll tell us a little more about that this afternoon. He's the former founder and CEO of Livio Radio, Livio Connect, which he founded in his home in 2008. He's a true startup entrepreneur. He developed the company developed products and services and tools to support connectivity in the mobile environment. He's a successful entrepreneur many times over, but he did sell Livio to Ford in 2013. And I always love to say this, I think it's so cool. Jake is also a very talented DJ. We've had him DJ at some of our events. He's very skilled, very talented. In fact, I think that's where he got started. You can tell us this then, confirm this, Jake, but he started DJing to pay the bills. But through that process, he developed one of my favorite products at home, which is the original Ion USB turntable that turns vinyl into digital format. So thank you for that, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
And I should also note that Jake he's from Detroit, and he's heavily involved in the efforts to revitalize and re-energize and rebrand Detroit as a tech center. We'll talk a little bit about his efforts with One Detroit. So thanks, Jake.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Also with us is Tyler Suiters, who's on staff here at CEA. He's our Senior Director of Communications, where he manages our public policy efforts, our Executive Visibility Program, and our divisional promotions. So you may hear a lot from Tyler throughout the year. Prior to joining us, he ran a number of strategic communications campaign at Edelman PR, one of the world's leading PR agencies. And he's also a seasoned journalist, broadcast journalist. He reported for CBS News, Bloomberg TV, and a variety of NBC and ABC stations across the country. And he'll be moderating our next week's panel on great PR on a shoestring budget, and also doing some media training. So thanks, Tyler. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Absolutely. I was up too late watching the Redskins just get wiped out by the Giants last night. But other than that, this is a really nice refresh.
Well, so you're doing that. I was watching Jeter just have that magic moment.
Yeah, I grew up a Red Sox fan, so even I had to admit that Jeter looked terrific. I mean, how can you write a better ending than a walk-off game-winning hit, right?
Yeah, I'm not a Stripes fan either, a Pinstripes fan either, but you got to admire great athletes. So with that, let's go to a great entrepreneur. How's that for a transition? Jake, can you give us just a little preview of what you're going to talk about on the panel? Maybe sort of one theme that you would like to discuss as you talk about startups.
Well, sure. I mean, well, first of all, the way that I usually roll with panels, especially when it's entrepreneurs, is just explaining the story a little bit and then just turning it around, asking for questions. So if anyone's watching this, if you're going to be out at the conference, bring some questions with you. We want to answer your questions. This is about time for you, not about time for us. But with that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we all face together that we don't compete on. Things like how to handle PR, hiring strategies, how to even just be a better entrepreneur. So like the biggest thing I learned with my first startup was just how to be a good mentor, how to be a good boss, how to be a good fundraiser, how to be good at QuickBooks, and understanding the process and making sure I spend enough time balancing between running my business and then time actually working on product and service development. So I think the balance, and then they're also part of that is like work life. So I think just really understanding like what we all face together as entrepreneurs in the tech industry, and understanding how we can work together and learn from each other, so you can be better at being an entrepreneur no matter what your field is. I mean, that's really what this is about. And again, I want to sandwich that with bring your questions. We want to hear from you.
Right. So really, you're available to discuss sort of soup to nuts, from the basics all the way through driving a business. But one thing you mentioned that I've always sort of wondered about, and again, I don't want to take away too much from your panel, but we could just tease it out a little bit here. So you get started, and you have all those issues. How do you build a team? Identifying financing, all that stuff. But once you sort of you're ramped up a little bit and you're rolling, you've got your product or service in the marketplace. How do you get that balance between running the business and making sure you're hitting your marks, but still being innovative? I mean, clearly you can't just sort of develop one product or service and stop. You've got to keep moving forward. How do you allocate resources and sort of, even in your own mind, strike that balance between the two?
Well, the biggest thing is knowing what's important and what's urgent. So one of the things that we did at Livio, which we also do at my new company, Tome Software, is every employee in the company has a piece of paper that's taped up next to their workstation. And that piece of paper has two sections. One section is what their roles and responsibilities are, and there can't be more than 5 things, because I have 5 things. And I tell people, if you have more than 5 things, you're doing more than I'm doing, which means that you're not doing it. And the second part of that is what their goals are, and it's their personal goals, their professional goals. And like we had people talking about being a better parent, a mom or a dad, being, going back to school and getting my MBA, and really learning some skills that may be outside the box. So if you know what your roles and responsibilities are up top, and then underneath that, what you're trying to do personally to develop, then it's a really good trade-off for the company. And that's how we focused on doing this as a company, and I did this myself. So, mine, and it changes. It changes every month, and this is something, because it's posted, we share that with people, and people know what our goals and responsibilities are. And to be a better entrepreneur, you really have to break up your day, and you have to have really good time management. I think multitasking is impossible. I don't know. I mean, you guys might have some different feelings on this call today, but the idea of multitasking, I think, is almost impossible. The right way to do this is around managing your time and knowing that if there's a goal that you have to take steps to get to that goal. And if it's not a priority, it's just not going to happen. So if you have a priority of being innovative, we did something, and the example of this is we had a thing called Lab Day, which we still have at Livio, which is a Ford subsidiary, and there's also Lab Day at Tome Software. So the first Tuesday of the month, the entire day, we shut down all email, we shut down everything, and we just do cool stuff. We learn new things, we take new challenges, and that's just one example of how we remain innovative. And there's a whole bunch of other best practices that I've blogged about on my blog at jakesigal.com and blog for puremichigan.com, just talking about some of those examples. But the key is that making time for a process and making time to do those things. And whether those things are, I mean, you're going to figure that out for your own business, but you have to make that time, and you have to make like the business of, I should say that you have to make it a priority actually running your business, not just doing products and services.
Right. And I think that prioritization and time management is so important, no matter what size company you get to. So clearly, part of that process and part of that decision-making prioritization goes back to PR and media. How do I promote my company? How do I promote my service or software or product, even as I'm continuing to innovate and build this company? So Tyler, with that in mind, what are some of the themes that you want to roll out in your session that may be helpful particularly for small companies and for entrepreneurs?
Well, Jeff, what I think is one of the key points here is the fact that the barrier to entry, so to speak, has never been lower for a company in terms of entering the public conversation. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. It's free to join any social media platforms. It couldn't be easier to engage with local media right now, and there is an expense if you're going to buy a cup of coffee or share lunch with somebody. But it's a thinly veiled wall right now. You can speak directly to your customers, to influencers, to media as well, through your Twitter account, through your Facebook sign up. And that's clearly one part of it, and a very strategic approach, and there are all kinds of tactics you can delineate through both of those. The other side would then be just person to person. Think about the media market where you are. Now, if you're in Silicon Valley, it's a pretty crowded space. If you're in Boise, Idaho, much better chance for you to get involved in that public conversation with local media. Get to know your reporters, get to know your TV stations, people who are making decisions there. Don't forget about radio as well. And then who knows who the bloggers are who are in your space, either topically or geographically. Really two sides to the equation of what gets in the news. Part of it is, of course, what crosses the barrier in terms of what is quote-unquote newsworthy. But the other part is that these reporters are looking for a constant flow of content. Help them realize that by giving them your story, understand what they want, and then try your best to give them what they want on a regular basis.
So that's great advice. Thank you, Tyler. It sounds like a lot of those things are relevant for small and big companies. Are there differences that you can identify, or that maybe you'll pull out in the panel this year, that the way a small startup may approach this process versus a larger company? Clearly, there's resource issues, but beyond that, are there sort of different ways to get in and different tactics maybe, or strategic considerations?
Yeah, a good point you bring up, Jeff. I think part of it is the fact that as a smaller company. Your personnel, your tactics are more wieldy. You can get things done faster, more nimbly, more nimble. There is less time taken generally on the turnaround to get out a statement to the press, to react to major news, to put content together, simply because there are fewer people involved in the checks and balances process. So you can be faster in your reactions. We all want to tell a proactive story about how great our company is, our thought value is, our policy issues are, but the fact that you can react and weave your narrative into real-time news, that's what we call a news hook, right? Get a piece of that overall news story. Take, for example, the launch of the iPhone. Do you make a product that's associated with it? Do you have an app that could play on it? Are you in that space? Hook onto that larger news story and react quickly. Part of it is, of course, anticipatory, but the other element of the equation is reacting quickly. As a smaller company, you can make those decisions faster. You can get your message out more quickly as well.
Jake, you've had experience in this area. What's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew from a PR perspective, media relations perspective, when you were starting Livio? What have you learned that you wish that you'd known back then?
Like when usually the first thing you think of is the right thing to answer to any question when you get this sort of thing. So I'm just going to go with it. It's don't talk until you have something ready to sell or something ready to go. So like we had a ton of press in 2008, like with USA Today, New York Times, everything else. And we didn't have any products to sell. We also didn't even have a website with an email holder. And this is a tip somebody gave me. So even with our new stealth startup, we're not even talking about what we're doing. I have an email grabber on our site today at tomesoftware.com, and if you want to follow us on Twitter, it's at TomeOwl, O-W-L. Like, you can go right there and follow us. You can add your email in, and just a place to like get people's info, but don't say anything until you're actually ready for someone to buy it. Because when we were selling radios, and our first product was a radio that tuned into Pandora called the Livio Radio featuring Pandora, and back in 2008, again, before iPhones were big, I mean, they came out, this was definitely for Android phones, the idea was if you want to listen to internet radio, you needed some device or you drag your laptop around. Well, we got all these people excited, but we didn't actually have a product yet. So you get someone's attention, but you couldn't actually convert. So like now the conversion for our new company is just, hey, we're in stealth, we're getting started, add yourself to the email list, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter, and when you actually have something to say, then go big with it. And it's really hard because it's so easy, especially for me on the second time around, but like everybody wants to know what we're doing, and once you say it, it's not news anymore. So you only get one shot at it to get it out there. And with the if you are a startup and you don't have those relationships and you're saying, all right, that's cool, you've done this before, Jake, but what about me? I've never done this. How do I get out there? I mean, focus on the niche group. And for you, it may not be New York Times as the right article. For you, it might be your niche service.com blog that everybody that cares about what you do reads. I mean, a good friend of mine who's actually speaking on a panel, Enrique Mouchant, who has a Desktop Fab, his first business he was doing, he was launching flashlights, which, I actually was going to take my laptop back and find it, these really badass flashlights. And he launched his business just by putting this thing on these flashlight blogs where I didn't know there's thousands of people that care that much about flashlights. But he figured it out, and that's what everybody wanted to see. So whatever you're doing, find that niche group that you can get it out to, but don't spill it until you're actually ready to do something. It's just saying you're out there, it's going to make you feel good, but it's not actually going to convert to some sort of a customer acquisition or a sale.
Yeah. I think that's one of the key points, Jeff and Jake were sharing, which you were alluding to, Jake, is the fact that you need to know your audience in terms of outreach, not just the reporter you're engaging with directly or the media you're engaging with directly, but overall the audience you want to reach. Like you said, if there's a small market for camera flashlights, hit that market. That's great before you go large. The other part of that is I've heard it explained in an anecdote that if you're going to have a housewarming party, just don't paint the outside of the house and do the landscape without cleaning up inside. And Jake, to your point, have everything in order inside, which is your product, your services, your means of engagement, those venues, before you invite everybody to come.
Right.
Yeah,
Be prepared.
absolutely.
I think that's an excellent point. So many people when I talk to, they want to get that big, especially with all due respect to Jake, CEOs, they want to get that big splash in New York Times, USA Today, be on the nightly news. And sometimes that's not necessarily the best strategy. It's maybe better to sort of build your natural audience, create that sort of fan base, right? And that helps generate excitement, and then use social media to sort of leverage beyond that and trumpet beyond that. So that's an excellent point. Jake, I was just wondering, as you think about this panel and you think about the environment you're in, you see different reports on the state of the economic recovery. We're growing jobs, but maybe not as fast as we should. Some sectors are recovering and whatnot. What's your take on the general state of the recovery? And more specifically, how are you finding the funding? How are you finding the capital markets and other sources of funding? More difficult than they were? Is it a little easier? Any tips to help startups sort of navigate that maze?
Well, I think that as far as the capital side goes, you really have to have a good understanding of the service that you're offering, and that's like step one. So if you understand your product and service and you know who your customer is, go there first, because that's where you're going to find investors. And the best investors are customers. And I went through angel funding, VC financing, debt financing, you name it, I've been through. And actually, the only thing I haven't done is an IPO. But I should say yet. But hopefully.
Right. You're mouth to God's ears.
Right. It's on the bucket list. But I think that the key thing is understanding who cares about what you're selling. It's kind of like the so what factor of PR goes right into finance. So I see so many entrepreneurs waste time going through the typical angel VC pitch process, when instead you'd be better off saying, if I'm making flashlights, just going back to that example, there might be 5 strategic partners that really, really care about flashlights because they're in the flashlight business. And then you got to think about what are companies that buy a lot of these flashlights, maybe it's the power companies and people that need these things, and find out who needs these types of products and how can you work with them to try to create a product with them. So a lot of entrepreneurs I see that are looking for financing, they're looking for a check, and a check's not going to get them to where they want to be. And I didn't learn that until 3 years into my business. I wish I did. So a lot of the advice I give, and that's probably the number one question I get is, a question involving the word VC, capital, finance, cash. I always go to, very few exceptions, unless you're a company north of 5 million in sales, which most startups are not. I usually go with, look, you need to figure out who your customers are and then try to cut a deal with them. And if you really are looking for growth capital, that's a different deal. That's more of a financial transaction. Yeah. If you're watching this saying, well, I'm not sure if I need growth capital or not, or you don't know what that is, and you probably don't, and you probably aren't. So that's you're in a situation where your gross margin is 5-10%. You're growing, you're doing lots of sales, but you need capital to grow the business as opposed to capital to start a business. Really what you want to find is a customer with a multi-year contract, and that's a much least, it's a lot lower cost in equity, and the cash is a lot cheaper, and it's a lot easier to close that deal too.
That's great advice. And so Maybe riffing off that a little bit, as some of our attendees for next week go into these mentoring sessions, what are some of the key questions you think they need to consider as they talk to their mentors, whether it's sort of in this area of finance and capital acquisition, or are there other things? Maybe give them some advice of what they should think about as they go into these meetings.
Well, I think that when you go into a mentor meeting, you need to really have like 3 questions or less, like 1 to 3 questions, not 4, not 5, but 3 very specific questions. You could say something like, I'm launching this product. This is what this product or service does. I have these customers. I'm trying to learn how I can go into a different sales channel. Or you can ask a question about, like, I'm considering hiring another salesperson, and should we be doing this? Like, those are the kind of specific questions you want to get at. And as far as like capital raise goes, I think that there are 2 types of companies: companies that are in control of their future financially, and companies that aren't. And at Livio, we were in control of our future for about 1.5 years, and then we lost that control to a board. Once you take money from a VC, you lose that control as an entrepreneur. Now, you still have a seat at the table, and you still have a lot of value you bring into it, but you no longer maintain that control. So if you want to keep that control, you should try to leverage that and try to keep as many options open. So if you're watching this thinking, okay, what does all this mean for me, is that if you haven't taken capital before, think about ways that you can bring in the capital you need to grow your business, or not even have to bring in that capital, because maybe you can get another engineer from a supplier or a customer to do your marketing, or some other way to do a partnership to avoid the cash you need in the first place to give yourself extended runway. And aside from that, if you are raising capital through venture, I'd say you want to make sure you have options. So once you lose control of your destiny, and anyone that's in the VC, they've lost they don't have control. I mean, they have a say, but they lose that control, then you're in a different position, and you're really looking at, what kind of capital, what kind of runway do you need for, 2 to 3 years of cash flow to give yourself flexibility to execute a plan as opposed to create a new one.
So, Tyler, Jake just spoke a little bit about I'll call it a mistake or an error, sort of, the companies come in and forget about some of these things, or as they start up companies. How about on the PR side? What's a common mistake that you see in PR that large or small companies may make?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest, Jeff, is simply not understanding what is news, quote unquote, and that's certainly a fluid definition and very subjective. But speaking from my years as a television correspondent, the best stories, the ones that we would seek out to tell, ones with some sort of tension in there. So it's not an entirely good news story, and not necessarily an entirely bad news story. So if your company starts up and it succeeds from day one and things are going well, not necessarily a great story. If you had one round after another of VC turndowns, or problems getting the financing, or product launches didn't go well, and now you're hitting it big, there's that tension, right, where you had failure to success. So I would say the one mistake is not understanding why your good news story isn't getting great pickup in the media. There needs to be some element there that makes it different. Change, transition, good to bad or bad to good, both sell awfully well. So I think in one headline, it's simply understanding what reporters want from you. And then the subheadline is tell them the story that they need, present it in the right way. And we'll go into exactly how you can do that both in a one-on-one level and for your messaging writ large at Innovate next week.
Excellent. That's a great transition. As I say, this is all great stuff, you guys. And for those of you who are watching, this is just a sort of a bite-size, snack size of what you'll get next week. And we only have a few minutes left. But Jake, we're talking about Innovate. We're very excited about it here at CEA. I think it's going to be a great event. You've been engaged with CEA for a number of years. You've sat on the board. You've been to the events. As an entrepreneur and as a startup, what have you taken? What's the value of these events? What's the value of your relationship with CEA? How has it helped you grow and develop your businesses?
Well, I mean, I can't say enough things about the Consumer Electronics Association and really the people like Jeff, like yourself and your team that put this together. So with CES going on, a lot of startups say, do I belong at CEA? What's in it for me? How's this go? And it's really a network. So there's a side of this which is interacting with other entrepreneurs about things that we all share and we all have together. That's the first piece. The other piece is networking within your industry. So understanding where those business opportunities are. Like, it's not about electronics anymore. I mean, CEA is really about the technology world, and automotive, for example, and representing Detroit a little bit. It's one of the largest sections at the show now. So I think that You're just understanding that there's so much that goes on within CEA at the show at CES, and then on the backside of it, there's so many member resources, market data, research, everything else, and really it's around the relationships. So, having that access, and on a PR side, I mean, Tyler, you may know this, that CEA has just an amazing set of PR folks. We've got Jim, who goes around and does the roadshow with all of your favorite products and toys and services, and we leverage that as a small company starting and had our products going around on the roadshow, and I mean, that kind of opportunity, you just don't get that, and that's something that is provided as a member of the association, and they do have a startup membership category, which is awesome. So there's so many ways that we could talk about this for 2 days, but I'd say that on the CEA standpoint, it's like I wouldn't be where I am today without the people at CEA helping me get where I needed to go. So I mean, they're not going to figure out my next great product or the next great technology, but they were like almost like 5 desks in my office that were there all the time of people in DC that were helping out, and that it's hard to put a value on that.
Jake, that's really kind of you. I just want to add, Jess, since we started off talking about sports, I want to close by paraphrasing Jerry Maguire. For everyone who's considering attending, or we're going to see you next week in Phoenix, help us help you. Just tell us what you need, tap our expertise. We're here for you, and we're here to help.
Okay, and I just add that thank you for your kind comments, Jake. But we couldn't do it without you, and without great volunteers like you who get engaged, who help support us, who help drive us, help us understand what your needs are. To Tyler's point, but we really need that engagement to be successful. All right, last quick lightning round question before we close out. CS is just around the corner, right after Innovate. We're very excited. What trend do you think are you excited to see? What do you think will be hot at the 2015 CS? And I'll start with Tyler.
Oh, man. Any one of the tech trends to watch, which you're going to unveil next week. But
nice pitch.
I will say that what has me most excited just in the last 24 hours is the FAA's announcement of the decision to allow certain production companies in Hollywood to move forward with drones for filming progress. And that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what these drones have in terms of the potential for us, both work-related and just pure fun and creativity and the innovation that goes into them. I know our space is bigger than ever devoted to this one sector. I can't wait to get there. I don't expect to drive or fly one necessarily, but I'm really excited to see what's available.
The sky's the limit, as we said. And Jake, how about you?
Well, being at CES for the last 10 years or so, I think that the biggest change that we're looking at now is how apps and services are talking to devices. So even going on what Tyler said about the drones, my lens that I look at, and this is kind of what I'm most excited about, is companies that traditionally would not be at CES. You're finding unexpected business announcements. So I call it I like to refer to this at Tome software as the peanut butter jelly effect, where somebody figured out these two things tasted good together, but who knows? I want to meet the guy or gal that figured out peanut butter jelly works. So look for peanut butter jelly at CES. You're going to see companies. You're going to be like, what is that company doing at CES, and why are they working with this company? This is a terrible idea. It's going to fail. Or someone might be like, it's the greatest thing ever. And we're going to see some really new, unexpected experiences, unexpected values from these types of relationships that are being formed between different unconnected services and products with connected hardware.
Outstanding point. Well, on that point, it's time for my lunch. So thank you guys very much. We appreciate your participation. We're excited about Innovate. In fact, it's a conference that we're so excited about. We put an exclamation mark at the end of it. It's not just an event. It's an entire feeling, entire energy. Next week in Phoenix, you can find out more at www.ce.org/innovate. I want to thank Tyler. I want to thank Jake. You can follow me on Twitter at JAJoseph. Jake, you're at?
Jake Sigal.
And Ty?
Tyler Sears.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you next week in Phoenix.
All right, see you guys. Thank you.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. Just sort of stare at me. Good world.